At the end of my last video, I showed you a sneak peek of this wrench knife that I made. But there's a really bad problem with this knife, and that is, it can't kill an elephant. So to address this problem, I decided to build this one. I decided to go with the biggest wrench that the hardware store had to offer, which was this 32mm wrench. This is a really nice knife, but it took a long time to make. This took at least, 8 to 12 hours maybe, of a lot of grinding, some cutting, and it's fun to make, but I would rather have a anvil and forge it out and hammer it so that I could have a bigger blade and I wouldn't have to do so much grinding. But yeah, it works. So today I'm going to show you how to make this really cool wrench dagger. Now I went and drew out the tip with a red Sharpie, and I just did this by eye, and you just want to make sure it looks pretty centered. Be sure that you're using the right type of grinding wheel for each application. For instance, in this case we're using a cutoff wheel for cutting, and the rest of the knife will be using a grinding wheel. Also, make sure that you're wearing eye protection and ear protection at all times. You can see that I'm using a drill, but about halfway through the video, the angle grinder that I ordered on the internet came, and so then the rest of the project will be using that. Now that those pieces are out of the way, we can start refining our tip. Now that we have these slits in here, I'm going to cut that way with the angle grinder, and then we'll get all these pieces off. The reason why we have to cut these slits first and then go that way is because our blade does not curve with the blade of our wrench knife. So, yeah. You can actually see that some of those little pieces of metal are actually turning purple because of how hot they're getting. So as you can see, we have this ridge here and also on here. So I'm going to take my cutoff wheel and cut that off so that we have a smooth piece. Now that we have those ridges off, we can finally take our angle grinder and start grinding in the bevels of our sides. The angle for each bevel should be about 15 to 20 degrees. Occasionally, it's a good idea to look at the side and make sure that you haven't ground down some parts more than others. Also, I'm using a coarse grinding wheel, not one of those fine ones that are the cheapest ones. You want to get a heavy-duty one that will take off more material. It will take you at least an hour for each bevel if you're using this 32mm wrench that I'm using. Eventually, you'll get to this stage where the bevel is halfway the thickness of the handle, and this is what we want. It's a good idea to grind one side of the wrench knife first. So we have the right side done, so now we're going to work on the left side. Again, you want to make sure that you have the same 15 to 20 degree angle. And so here you can see what the first side should look like. You can see that the bevels meet pretty much at the middle. Now I can flip the whole thing over and work on the other two faces. And now you can see that the bevels are finally meeting to our final edge. So here you can see that the wrench is pretty much done, or the knife. So the edges are pretty good, except as you can see, the blade has turned this straw gold color because of how hot it's gotten. So I'll just take a sanding wheel. This is a 240 grit sanding, flat sanding wheel. Now the higher the grit, the smoother and the shinier your blade will become. So 240 grit is pretty fine. The general ones that you'll find are 60 to 120. So those ones would work fine, but just the higher the grit of sandpaper, the shinier your blade will become. So let's get to it. Just in case you're curious, this is how you can change the wheels on an angle grinder. Now you just want to sand it down at the same angle that we ground in our bevels. If there are some areas that need a little more work, then you can work them in. Just be sure not to pay too much attention on one area, but you want to make sure that everything just gets blended together. So as you can see, that made a very nice shiny finish onto our knife. And as you can see, compared to the other side, it looks really nice. So I went ahead and did the other side, and here's the finished knife. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any suggestions for future projects, go ahead and tell me in the comments section. Hopefully, I'll see you guys next time.